I have wrote an article on this specific point, how to find the idea of the project itself. Usually people get stuck in this point where what idea should I do my project on? So yeah, there is like a process which I think might help in this point. So first you have to find the domain of interest first. So like for example, I have interest in the medical domain, in e-commerce, in finance and so on. You have to list the number of at least 5 domains that you have interest in and would like to work in. Because at the end of the day, that scientist or that analyst or whatever, they are working in a certain domain where they apply that science and AI to get insights or to make something within a certain domain. So first find the domain that you have interest in, because this will improve the whole cycle after that. So yeah.
Youssef, welcome. I'm so glad to have you on my podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, first I would like to thank you for the invitation and also for organizing the podcast. My name is Youssef Hosni. Currently, I'm a senior data scientist at a startup, which is like have a side of an AI which I'm developing right now. But yeah, we're still in a private mode because we didn't go public till now. And before that, I was working as a researcher, so I shifted from the research to the industry. I worked as a researcher in AI for healthcare for around 3 years. I hold a bachelor degree in communication and electronics engineering and master's in computer science. And currently I'm living in Finland. So yeah, it's pretty cold right here now.
Yeah, how did you end up in Finland? That seems like, I guess for background, my mom actually, she's Polish, but she studied Finnish in school and she was in Finland for a while. And she always is very curious why people end up in Finland.
Yeah, so actually after finishing my bachelor degree, I was applying for different master's degree, and Finland, because they have like scholarship for the tuition fees. So yeah, it was one of the options. And when I got accepted in multiple universities, and I chose like Oulu University because the program was fitting my goals at the point. I like start a career here. So yeah, and things like gone really fast. So I have been here for 5 years now, and I'm in my 6th year. Yeah, and I really like it here. Only the winter is very hot, but other than that, it's quite friendly. Everything is good. So
I personally love the winter, so I can see why Finland would be nice. I think we have a very interesting topic today that you have some expertise on, which is how to build your data science portfolio. And you have even written an ebook on the topic. And so I would love to have you speak a little bit about that, and then we can go into any level of detail.
As I mentioned, before that I was working as a researcher. So when I was trying to shift from the research to the industry, there was like a gap. People in the industry, what they really appreciate is industrial experience. So probably what they really appreciate and give it like a lot of points is that you have experience before. The research experience is not counted as industrial experience here. So I have to find something that somehow compensate this to be able to apply for the industry when I was starting to apply. And I came through the idea of having a data science portfolio where you have your projects, you have them with a good description, you have the results visualized in a good way and so on. And after that, I find a lot of people also suffering, especially if they are fresh graduates, so they have the same problem where they don't have industrial experience, especially if they didn't manage to get an internship during their studies. They also have the same problem where they don't have experience. Even companies who are looking for junior data science, they expect that you have at least internship or something. So when you don't have any, the project come into place to compensate for this. So yeah, so I started writing some articles. First I started writing some posts on LinkedIn, and I found people really like it and I got good feedback. So I started extending this into articles, and the same happened. I got really good feedback. So yeah, I just wrote, I think, around maybe 10 articles around this topic. And after that, I just collected them and organized everything and put them into an ebook on the same topic. The main goal is just to give you an idea why you need a portfolio, how to build your portfolio, what are the mistakes that you should avoid, how to build end-to-end project that really counts and that will help you to find a job and so on. And what are the resources that you can start from, what are the starting points that you can use, where you can find the data and so on. Yeah, it was just like small articles, and I just collected them and put them into one source.
So I want to delve a little bit into the process of writing articles on LinkedIn, because that's where you started. And I think there is this big jump from having an idea to actually doing it. And probably the more times you repeat this process, the easier it gets, right? But it sounds simple, just write an article on LinkedIn and publish it, but it's actually quite scary because you're putting yourself out there. So how was this process for you of actually having a topic and then publishing it?
Now, as you mentioned, because I have been doing this for like 1 year and maybe 5 months or something. So yeah, it's become much easier now. I started first on LinkedIn itself, so I was just writing small posts. They were mainly like some practical tips, some notes that I got or I read from a book, or some practical tips that I got by working on a project, or even a career tip that I would like to share with people. I found it beneficial or really useful, so I would like to share with people. And after that, I was just want to write more. The LinkedIn post is better to be short, because if it's very long, people will usually skip it because you just like surf social media without the need to read very, very long posts. So yeah, the idea went from I need to write article because what I would like to say cannot be said in just a small LinkedIn post. So yeah, I went from this point to, yeah, I just want to share more ideas, I have more thoughts that I would like to express. So yeah, I found Medium is a great place because it's just very easy to start. You can just set up an account and just start publish there without any further needs. More than that, just you have to have like internet connection and a keyboard, which is available for everyone, I think. Yeah, I went from this point that there was a need. I have a need to write blog post. And of course, my first couple of articles was really bad, I believe. Now when I look at them, I think they are really bad. But yeah, I think everyone have a starting point. And if I just was thinking that I should write a perfect article, probably I will not start, or I wouldn't start at this point. So yeah, I think like the main burden, or the main thing that people usually don't go from idea to action, that this part where I would like to do something good. So yeah, I will just start to procrastinate till I get to this point where it should be like really good. But yeah, usually when you start, you will have this improvement cycle. So I start with something, it should be acceptable for you at least. Then you will go from idea to action, then you get a feedback, then improve it, and so on. And yeah, so I think this thing into action, even if it's not into the level that you was looking for, but after that it will improve by time.
I think one thing that's really rewarding once you actually start doing something is that you do get feedback from other people, right? There's this fear of not putting out something perfect, but really the worst case scenario is that no one sees it, right? So I would like to hear a little bit more about what kind of feedback did you get from LinkedIn and from your Medium articles, and how did that help you develop your writing further?
The feedback itself can have different forms. One of them is just like the likes and the shares that you got. So this can be an indication on how the topic itself is interesting or not. Also, I got a lot of DMs after that when I start writing more and more, so that my articles helped people. And also this, of course, encouraged me to continue. Also, when I was featured on others' posts, so like after that, when I start to write more and more, so other people would mention me in their posts that I am writing good articles. So yeah, follow him or just read his articles and so on. Of course, I got also some not negative feedbacks, but constructive feedbacks where there is some mistakes or there is some points that I didn't cover. So I will just try to improve the cycle every time. Yeah, and of course, even me, I can like when I get an indirect feedback where I write something, but it was not read in the level that I was expecting. I know that there is something wrong, whether the topic itself is not interesting, the timing is not perfect. Like people now are interested in something and I'm writing on a different topic. So yeah, there is like direct and indirect feedback, but you have to start to have this feedback cycle and start improving and see in which direction you are going.
So going back to the data science portfolio creation, would you want to walk us through what the big idea is, but then what are the practical steps to really get started? Because I think what a lot of students get stuck on, and I see that when I teach, is they have a very hard time narrowing it down to something specific. they do these like very general things. They get like data from somewhere, and then they try to run summary statistics and throw it into some regression. So I think the interesting question from my perspective is, how do you narrow it down to something that's specific enough that it's worth getting started on?
Yeah, great. I think I have wrote an article on this specific point, how to find the idea of the project itself. Usually people get stuck in this point where, what idea should I do my project on? So yeah, there is like a process which I think might help in this point. So first you have to find the domain of interest first. So like, for example, I have interest in the medical domain, in e-commerce, in finance, and so on. You have to list the number of at least 5 domains that you have interest in and you would like to work in. Because at the end of the day, that scientist or that analyst or whatever, they are working in a certain domain where they apply that science and AI to get insights or to make something within a certain domain. So first, find the domain that you have interest in, because this will improve the whole cycle after that. So yeah, read first about the available domains where AI and data science are applied. Then choose your top 5 or something, and arrange them into your priorities. What are the most interesting domain to you that you would like to build a career in? So, for example, we have, as I mentioned, medical domain. We have the communications domain, communication and telecommunication domain. You have the finance. They have the marketing. There's a lot of domains where we apply that science and AI in. After you find like your top 2 or 3 domains, start to see what are the case studies that are now applied in this domain. So, for example, in the medical domain, there are a lot of case studies that we apply AI in. Like, for example, we have tumor detection or tumor segmentation. This is one of the case studies that are currently active in the industry. So first you narrow down the domains, then in each domain or in your top domain, you start reading more about the case studies or what we are using AI in this specific domain. And then you have to do some market research to see what are the companies around you or in your city or in your country that are active in this domain and what they are doing at the moment. So let's give an example. You know that in Finland, it's really pioneering in the telecommunication domain, because they have Nokia, they have like multiple companies that are really active in this domain, and even the universities are doing great work. So yeah, if I have interest in this domain and already it's aligning with my market research and my market where I'm living at the moment, or where I would like to build my career at the moment, I will start like seeing, for example, Nokia, what they are doing at the moment, what are the case studies they are working, how they are applying AI now, what are the projects they are working, and I can find this by first reading the company blogs, for example, by seeing the recent, for example, the last AI and data science jobs that have been published by this company, what are the requirements. Usually they mention in the job requirements what they are doing, what you will be working on, what are the skills required, and so on. And also you can even, I think this might not work with big companies. You can just discuss with the employees right there. You can understand what are the skills required to work at their X company or whatever company, and what are the case studies they are working now. And like now you have more specific case studies that you start work on now. This is just better than just saying I have an idea that it's somehow isolated on what is going into in the market, and also what is being used in this domain. So like now you have some defined case studies. You have to start reading more about how AI and data science is used in this case study. And you start with the normal or the traditional data science lifecycle. You start with collecting the data. Then first, of course, before collecting the data, you start defining the business metrics, the KPIs, what I would like to achieve by this project. If it's like just a personal or a side project, it might be small. You can just say, I would like to improve the accuracy or even reach a certain baseline. And you just follow the normal and traditional data science life cycle. So you have, after that, you collect the data. You can find a lot of sources, like such as Kaggle. You can find open data sets, even provided by some companies if they have the work open sourced, or university labs. A lot of also university open their work and make it open source. And yeah, you can do the EDA and data cleaning, feature engineering. Then you do the modeling part. And of course, the modeling part itself will depend on the case study. So, for example, if I have interest in the medical domain, So yeah, most of the or large number of the case studies are being used by computer vision. So I have to focus first on computer vision. If I'm interested, for example, in the finance and e-commerce, so usually I will be using time series. So I have to make sure that I have already the knowledge needed to do this project and so on. And yeah, I just go through the whole process till I train the model and fine tune the hyperparameter tunings and find the best hyperparameters that I have. And you have to take it like one more step. If you can deploy the model, if it's like predictive model, you will not do some data analysis only. You will have to take it further step and do some deployment and make it end to end. And you have to go also another step further, which is you have to start document your work and put it into GitHub and maybe write a blog on it, publish it on your social media so people around you know that you are interested in that sciences, what are you capable of, and so on. So yeah, it somehow it seems like a long process, but when you break it down into small steps and step by step, you can finish it maybe. Usually, what I advise people to do if they are working on their master thesis or bachelor thesis, they can do an end-to-end project in this period, because usually you have time to work on just one project, so you can dedicate time, and at the end of the day, you'll get credits to it also.
And so what I hear is in the beginning, you want to combine your interest, which can be a broad field, with something very specific that's based on what is being done in this field now by companies who are in that field. And so that requires putting in some effort in terms of finding the company blogs, maybe speaking to some people who work in that field. And that might actually be a good excuse to network. I think many people would be happy to chat with a student who is not asking for a job, but just reaches out and says, I'm very interested in this field. Do you have 15 minutes to chat about what applications you see as being important?
Yeah, usually I get a lot of messages that I'm looking for a job and just give me his resume, but I just reply I can't help because I didn't have any barrier conversation with you. I don't know you. So usually people just ghost him or don't reply to him. So a better approach is you approach in a similar way as you mentioned. So.
Do you have any thoughts on when to start looking for data availability? Because of course, there's very many interesting applications that data is not as easily available for. And so maybe we don't want to spend too much time researching a topic and then realizing there isn't any data to be found.
It's a good question. I think it depends on the domain itself. But yeah, I think now it's difficult unless you are working on a very sensitive topic that there is no data at all, like maybe in the military domain, for example, or yeah, usually I think, like generally speaking, most of the domains will have available data, unless you are working on a very specific. For example, if you are working in the medical domain and you like to get a data from a certain device, this might be difficult. Of course, you have to be in a research lab that they have this device. But generally speaking, you can find, of course, data related to the medical domains that you can apply most of the techniques that you'd like to learn and showcase your skills in this area. So I think usually the data availability itself will not be a problem unless you are working on a very specific problem, which I think when you are building a data portfolio, it's better to work on a more generic cases, because like the recruiters can relate to the case studies that the company are working on after that. And you can like have more options after that when you start applying for jobs.
I think it can be easy for students or people with less experience to get stuck in the research phase, because it's very easy in a way. You click on links and you read articles, and you can always read more articles. Do you have any tips for how to make sure you actually get to the doing phase? For example, do you think it's good to put a time limit on how long it should take you to choose a topic in a data set?
Yeah, this is a very good question. I think there is a good approach. I'm not sure if it's like the best approach or not, but I usually advise people to start with a guided project. So yeah, basically a guided project is a project where someone guides you step by step from just like finding the idea, or sometimes the idea itself is already established, but they guide you through the whole phase of the project till you deploy it. I think doing at least one or two guided projects will give you the mentality of how I go from the idea itself to action and complete a full data science project. Because usually when you don't know what is coming up or what are the next steps, you're stuck in the current steps that you are working on, because you don't have like the vision of the project itself, how it will go, what should I do, and what are the next steps, what should I search for, and so on. So usually I think first start maybe with one or two guided projects. In my book, and also I wrote a couple of articles about like the most interesting guided project in different domains, such as computer vision, data science, LLMs, and so on. This I think should be a very good starting point. After that, you can follow similar process, but you just have to spend more time in finding the idea. Yeah, and I think actually you can also use the guided project as a starting point where you follow him and get the project done, and after that you can start modifying it to your need, and or like changing the idea itself and start building on what you have done with him.
Yeah, I was going to ask, where do you find these guided projects?
Okay, I can share with you the links for the articles I have wrote, but yeah, there is on the YouTube, there is, for example, Udemy, there is on different education sites, but I have collected them into a couple of articles, into 3 or 4 articles, so people can just find them in one place. And of course, they are also in my ebook. I think they are a very good starting point, but they should be not your only point. If you have done only guided project, it will be somehow useless, because like the guided project are public project. A lot of people have done similar projects, so they will not make you looks unique. And also, especially if the project is very popular, for example, like the projects that are on Coursera, for example, or the projects that are within very famous courses such as Andrew machine learning course. So usually this will not give you any credibility, because like there is thousands of people have done the same project. So that's why it's very important to take extra step and do something on your own. But the guided project is just a starting point.
So I want to go back to your steps for making your own project. And I think what you outlined, which sounds in principle simple, which is find a topic you're interested in, define some specific application, find data, then do the quote unquote usual data science steps of analyzing the data and defining a model and achieving some results and defining KPIs and deploying it and documenting it, right? Like it sounds simple, but I think if you actually follow all of this and do it properly, you would be in the top 0.1% of job candidates I have ever seen.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I have been working also with a lot of fresh graduates, like within mentoring and so on. And the people who got hired really quickly was the people who was doing this during their studies. So they were building side projects, they were documenting it, and they were active on social media, like just promoting their work and so on. And they usually got hired like within a couple of months after graduation, even if they don't have an internship, or sometimes they don't even have computer science degree. So I think so. If you have done this, at least you will be in the top 5% of the job candidates, which is really enough.
Yeah. So when you're doing the data analysis, I find that students are often tempted to just compute the summary statistics of the data and then throw it into some algorithm, right? And you put data in an algorithm, you usually get some number back, and you kind of feel like you did something. So do you have any thoughts on what to keep in mind to actually do this properly in terms of really thinking about the problem and the data and what makes sense and what kind of model and why and so on?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. So basically, first you need to understand the data, understand the features that you have, because usually in the industry, especially if you are working on something that will be used in a real time, and you need the latency to be small, usually we don't use like very large models, we use just small models, but we have to do more work in the data itself to understand the data, like extract better features. And to do so, we have to understand the data itself and have a good understanding of what does it mean within the domain we are working in. And to do so, we have to do a lot of analysis, not only just the sample statistics, but we have to see if there is a shift in the data or not, if the data need normalization or not, and so on. Does the data have outliers or not? And is it an outlier within the domain you are working on or not? Also, you need to do a lot of data pre-processing. Usually, if you are working with a real data that is not cleaned, you have to do a lot of data cleaning. And to do so, you have also to understand the data to know what are the artifacts and what are the problem with the data first. So you have to do that exploration in a good way. And after that, start seeing the problem with the data, see what are, and after that you dig deep more and to know what are the real problems and what are not a real problem within the domain you are working in. So yeah, the major problem is when people are working on a small project, they get a very clean data, so they don't need to do a lot of work with it. But usually in real life, the data itself is complex and it's not cleaned, and you have to spend a lot of time understanding it, see what features you can extract from it, and so on. What I think will be a good approach is when you are building your project, try to get a unique data somehow. Don't just get the very popular data or the very clean data sets. You can somehow collect your own data, you can scrap the data, or you can, even on Kaggle, there is some complex data available there. And I think this will not only improve your skill, but also it will show up your skills, that you have the skill to work with complex data. You can also participate in Kaggle competitions. Usually the Kaggle competition, the data, of course, is good, but it needs a lot of work, especially when you are working on Kaggle competition. The main goal is to improve the performance. And to do so, usually you have to spend a lot of time working on the features and make it and extract like very good features. So this will be somehow a good approach if you need to know how to deal with the data in somehow that are similar to what you will be doing in the industry after that with the real world data.
Would you say it's a good heuristic to whatever domain you're working in and whatever data you're working with to find some specific examples in your data set? So suppose you're working with an e-commerce data set and you have customers with their order histories. You could take, say, 5 customer profiles and say, this is everything we know about this customer from the data. So basically convert the features and this specific data point into a story and highlight all the things that we know, the things we don't know, any shortcomings of the data.
I think you have to, you can do so, but you have to take like a fair sample. If you just take like very, very small samples, this might be biased sample and it might not show the whole distribution of the data. So usually we can do so, especially if the number of features are very, very large. We can just take percentage of the data that somehow represent most of the data. So we can work on it after that. Because if you have like sometimes you can work with thousands of features and it can be very difficult to visualize them and find the correlation between them and so on. So usually we can take like maybe the top 90% of the features that represent 90% of the information we have in the data, and we can start work with it. So I think we can do so also, but we have to make sure that this data covers the whole distribution of the data set that we have.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. If you have a very big data set, I think the purpose of the examples are to really make the data tangible. But of course, if you have 1,000 features, you can't walk through 1,000 features. I think that's a fair point. You have to be creative. That said, I think even if you have millions of data points and thousands of features, you should still look at a few data points, right? When you do summary statistics, anytime something doesn't add up, you have to actually look at a few rows. And I also think it's an art that you probably learned by experience. How do you do summary statistics to make sure that there's no funny stuff going on in the data?
And that's exactly, I think it's very important when you are building your portfolio project that you use somehow complex data. If you just use a very small data that maybe contain 100 row and maybe 10 features, this will not improve your skills and will not show up what you can do, because you just need some very, very simple calculations and you can go from there. But if you can use complex data where you have like at least thousands of rows or data points and tens of features, this will be a real data. And especially if it's not very clean, you have to do a lot of efforts in understanding the data, cleaning the data, and extracting valuable and meaningful features. So I think try to go with more complex data. It's better.
Right. And I think don't be afraid to spend a lot of time on just summary statistics and data cleaning. For example, if I'm hiring someone and I think they're just going to run a model, right, then I'm worried that I have to actually do their work to make sure there's no errors. And it can be simple things like having a string column where sometimes there is a leading space added before the actual word, right? And then if someone doesn't catch that, that can completely mess up the results. But to catch that, you have to know that you should be looking for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think like in most of the companies, usually in the hiring process, they have like an assignment or a test where you get a subset of a data set, and then they can discuss with you the approach you have followed. And if you just like calculate the summary statistics and just feed the data into the model, this will leave a bad impression about you to the recruiter or to the technical leader.
And to be honest, in any interviews, it shows very quickly who does the work thoroughly and who doesn't. It's like impossible to fake. So I want to talk a little bit about the deployment you mentioned. Suppose someone has never deployed a model, and now I think there are many tools that make deployment very easy. Do you have suggestions of where to start?
Yeah, I think you can just make a simple API using, for example, Fast API, and you can deploy it using Streamlit. This is like a very straightforward approach. You can learn it within a couple of hours. And you can also, after that, at least learn how to use one cloud provider such as AWS or GCP or Microsoft Azure. But yeah, you can just go with AWS, for example, because they have a lot of AI capabilities. And you can also learn how to deploy a model there, at least maybe one model. Even if it's just, you can just start with something simple to learn how to deploy. And after that, you can apply this to your end-to-end project.
So thinking about the last step, which maybe is the most important one, together with the summary statistics, and that is documenting, I think this is where you can really stand out. Do you have any thoughts on bad documentation versus good documentation?
The worst documentation that you can have that there is no documentation at all. And I see a lot of, even I was doing this mistake also where I just was relieved that I finished the project and I just want to put it into GitHub. And after that, I will start into a new project where I just want to work on something new and I just forget about the previous project and I don't have any documentation for it. So this is like, I think, the worst documentation that you can have where there is no documentation at all. And the best one where you have an introduction, a background about the project. And in this, you can talk more about the business goals and the requirements that you have, the KPIs that you're following, and so on. And then you can just also document every step you have done. So you can say how you have collected the data, then how the data or how the raw data was looking like, then what reprocessing steps you have done, how you clean the data. You can just mention this in a small words. No need just to explore or to describe everything you have done, just like small description about it. Then you can talk a little bit more about the modeling, what model you have choose and why, and what are the final hyperparameters that you have chosen. And after that, you can talk a little bit more about the deployment strategies that you have been following. And then it's important to have it, how to use the project. So you should have like a requirement file with the whole packages that you have been using to this project, how to download, how to run the project, and so on. So if someone wants just to replicate your work, he can just follow the steps that you have provided and can use it. Also, it's important that the code itself is documented because usually people will go through the codes and just see how clean is your code. So I think now it's very easy. You can do it by ChatGPT. You can just give it the code and start working on make it cleaner and well documented. But it's very important that the code itself is modularized, so it have different modules and following like the best practices for the data science and machine learning structure. So when someone just goes through your code, he can find it well organized, cleaned, following the best practices and so on. This will leave a very, very good impression about you when someone, because usually if I'm a technical hiring manager or I'm a technical lead for the position you are applying for, I would like to know how good you are writing your code. So I would just go there and see your codes. And of course, see the documentation. So you have to make sure that both of them are well documented and well written. At least you should have at least one good project like this.
And I think that raises an important point of you have to use AI tools to help document your code because it's just really inefficient not to do it. That said, at least today, AI still can't really write good code for you 100%. So you still have to know what you're doing.
Yeah, of course, you have to review it. Yeah, of course, yeah.
And I think where it especially also shows up is in the writing itself. It really shows if someone just wrote things using AI and it's very kind of vanilla and template versus if someone actually put some thought into it of what I did and why and what I learned and what are the implications.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Especially in the insights part, if you have some insights that you would share, especially if the project is like more data analysis project where you have to get insights, it's very important that you have like good storytelling, that you share what insights you got and what do they mean and so on. So yeah, it's very important.
I think this is super valuable, and I think for for students stuck in kind of analysis paralysis mode, these are steps where you can just really stop thinking and do it, right? Then you can always do another project and improve it. But done is better than perfect. With that said, I would like to switch gears a little bit since you have your own podcast. Could you tell us what it is about and how you got started with it?
I have also, it's a technical podcast. It's about AI and data science. And why have I started? Because there is like a lot of English podcasts, even technical and also about data science. But there was like, I think, no podcasts in Arabic language. So yeah, I have the idea to start an Arabic podcast that talks about that science and AI in somehow a deep way. And yeah, I just have the idea last year. I started early 2023. The main idea was just to help the data scientists to become better and to explore different domains and so on. So I started, my plan was to cover the different domains, how to start in the different domains of AI. So how to start in NLP, how to start in computer vision, how to start in data science, and then go into another level where we talk about how we apply that science in the banking domain, how we apply that science in the telecommunication domain, how we apply that science in different industrial domains. But of course, things it changed a little bit when I started. So yeah, I started to work more on a complex topic. So how we do feature engineering in a better way, how we use vector database, how LLM works, and so on. And of course, I'm still also doing some less technical episodes, so I can have some episodes that are talking about how to improve your career, how to stand up in interviews, and so on. But they are still in the recording phase. And yeah, when I started, I have of course a lot of plans that I would like to do an episode per week. But of course, this was very difficult to maintain. I just like last year, I have done these for eight straight weeks. Then I have to stop for around 3 or 4 months because I have some personal problems. I have to travel and yeah, I have to relocate and so on. So yeah, I ended up only recording 12 episodes last year. My plan was to record 48. So yeah. But yeah, before you start something, it's usually easier said than done. But when you start, you will find a lot of problems. Usually, like it's very, very hard to agree with the guest on a time, and usually they can just apologize before the meeting. Yeah, of course, you will have also some unexpected events that happen to you that you have to stop recording sometimes. This year, I also still have the same plan that I record 1 episode per week and publish 48 episodes. But I have different strategy now because I learned it from the last year. So now I usually have 4 episodes in my bank. So I started early and I recorded some episodes by the end of the last year. So now I usually have 4 more episodes. So I can like maintain the publish schedules that I have. And yeah, till now I have managed to publish, I think, 7 episodes this year. And I have some episodes in my bank. So yeah, I can depend on them if there is any unexpected events. And yeah, let's see how this year will go. But yeah, this is why you need to start, because I wouldn't know how difficult it was unless I have started. And yeah, every year I think will be better, or every cycle will improve somehow, because I just try to see where the problems and how to overcome them. And yeah, let's see.
Right. And so I think there's 2 valuable pieces of advice here. One is you have to start, and I can relate to that too. And the second one I can also relate to, you learn things and then you fix them, and then you figure out that you actually need to have a bunch of pre-recorded episodes. Otherwise, it gets very stressful, and also things sometimes don't work out with a guest or for some other reason. In terms of feedback from listeners, has there been anything that you particularly learned from doing this for a year?
Yeah, of course. One of them was focusing on the voice quality. From my side, it's good, but sometimes the guest himself might not have the best recording device. So I just try to make sure with him before we start that the voice is good. One problem was that I just use my headphones, so usually the voice is good from my side. But sometimes the listener will just listen from his laptop or mobile. So yeah, I just do some tests before starting that the voice is clear, even if I'm not using a headset. Also, I got a lot of feedback related to not only uploading the episode on YouTube, to upload them on Spotify and so on. I have been working on this, but I didn't have much time yet. And also to break down, because I do long form podcasts, so usually the episode is around 2 hours. So yeah, I got a lot of feedback to break down into chapters. So every chapter will talk about certain topic. Also, this is in the plan, but I didn't manage to do it yet. But yeah, I need this is improvements that I need to do. But yeah, my main focus now was just to have to follow my schedule and just publish in a consistent way. So I've been working on this somehow. Yeah, and usually I also got some questions that I need to cover. So when I publish before recording, I get a lot of questions that I might consider to ask my guests. Yeah, and I think like the most redundant comments that I got is you need to break down the episode into chapters so people can just go to their interesting chapters that they would like to hear, and to upload it on a different platforms. Because usually YouTube is not the best way to listen for a podcast. But yeah, I'm trying to do it now.
And so this feedback, is it from the listeners that you get?
Yeah.
And so they actually reach out to you.
Yeah, some of them just leave it on just leave comments on the video itself. Some of them reach out, some of them write the comment on LinkedIn, because when I announce the episode, I do it on LinkedIn, so they just put comments there. And I read it and I just put it into the process, but it takes time actually, because I'm doing it all myself, so it takes some time to do even a tiny change.
It's very time consuming. I've also found that. And I think sometimes when you watch people who have been doing podcasts for a long time and have a big audience, and I'm sure they have people who help them with the editing and the technical part, right? Like even uploading a video to YouTube takes time if it's a high resolution video. So everything takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as much talked about by people who have been doing it for a long time because they have already streamlined the process. But in the beginning, it's very hard to figure all of it out.
Yeah, and usually it will not be the best quality and it will not be the best form, but yeah, you have to do this to improve. There is no other way, I think. Even you have, from the beginning, you have a sponsorship and you have a team behind you that will make everything perfect. But if you just do it all by yourself and it's not your full-time job, it will have a lot of defects, of course. You have to expect this. Yeah, and we just try to improve bit by bit.
Yeah, I think this is super interesting. And I hope it's valuable information for people who are just starting to know that, like, yes, it is hard. It's supposed to be hard. So is there anything else you would like to add as a closing thought?
Yeah, I think like related to the podcast, I think it's really interesting at the same time. I have known a lot of people, but a very good connection with them. Also, I have learned a lot because I'm not expert in any of the. I'm just expert in a, or not even expert. I have some knowledge in a certain part, but all my guests have different experience in different domains. So I have been learning a lot. Actually, I consider it as like a private lecture because they just explain everything to me. So yeah, it's really good way to learn. If I just give one advice, is just to start, as you mentioned, better done than perfect. Try to decrease this threshold between having or the period between having an idea and putting it into action, and accept that every starting point might not be good as expected. Even you, after a couple of years or after a couple of iteration, you will not like the first version, but it's okay. It's part of the process, and enjoy it. Yeah, actually, every aspect have really enjoyable part. So like recording the podcast, it's really stressful and taking a lot of time, but at the same time, it's really interesting, especially if you get a feedback that people found the what you are doing interesting and they get benefits out of it. So yeah, just enjoy. Try to enjoy. Of course, it's somehow.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I think that is easy to forget, especially if you're more of a, I guess what's called perfectionist type, right? Which I think many people who do this kind of thing are, then you completely forget to enjoy it because you think it's not perfect.
Yeah, especially if you will provide something to the people. We have a lot of concern about this, how they will think or what they will think about me, how they will look at it, and so on. But yeah, just improve step by step. Yeah, there is no other way to do it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on my podcast. And we'll provide links to the resources you mentioned and also to your own podcast in case we have any Arabic speaking listeners. Thank you so much, Youssef.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much.